Hey everybody, so right here is where they do all the photo calls. So all the big movie premieres before the press conferences inside, they all come over here, and I mean they just take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos. All the stars line up here. I do believe they do a little bit of interviewing with the Canal Plus channel here, but it's basically, you know, a chance to get really, really good close-up photos, take them individually and take them as groups. And then after this, they walk along this blue carpet, and they walk up the stairs over the bridge, and they come in, they walk right past the press office where we've been living most of the time here. And then the press conference room is right next to it. They go in, they do their press conferences, and then they exit out and they go on to do whatever they have to do for the rest of the day. Big press conferences of the day were Foxcatcher, which was directed by Bennett Miller, who also directed Capote and Moneyball. That starred Channing Tatum, Ruffalo, and Steve Carell. It's about the 1988 Seoul Olympics, about Mark Schultz and the DuPont family, and the history behind that whole inspiring wrestler. They're wrestlers, and the big story behind that.
I wanted to speak with you about your future. What do you hope to achieve, Mark?
I want to be the best in the world.
I am a patriot. I want to see this country soar again. Coach is a father. Coach is a mentor. Coach has great power on the athlete's life. We got to spend some time with the family and friends of the Schultzes.
But to work with actors who are willing to, put faith in you.
So we just got out of the press conference of Foxcatcher, and we're just hoping to catch a moment with them as they come out. Right now behind me you can see all the photographers lining up. They're going to be capturing the pictures of everybody that attended the Foxcatcher. Carpet behind me. The stars come around in a caravan. They have police escort. They come out right there. And you have all these photographers line up, and they get ready. And there must be like 150 photographers there. And they have a little process in which they come, they stop, they take pictures to one side, they turn around, they take pictures to the next side. They take like 5 or 10 steps forward. They do the same thing over and over. Then they turn around at the bottom of the stairs, they face out to the crowd, they take more pictures, and then they meet the director of Cannes at the top of the stairs, take some more pictures, and then they go in. Yeah, so right now everything's about to start up, and we'll be bringing you the red carpet of Foxcatcher in a jiffy.
tell to a very own. So let's live, lost in the moment, taking it all in as
We just wrapped it up. I think today went a lot much better. Thanks to the angles we had. We got some beautiful shots. I hope you guys are going to be happy with it. But we had to come inside because it's actually really windy and rainy outside, and I'm just, I mean, you see this? I'm not about the rain right now. It's going to make my hair frizz. So, I mean, here's a little inside view of, this is the Palais, and we've still got, today's Monday, we've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There's still red carpet events for the rest of the week. So we're going to take a look at everything and hopefully bring you some more of those. So until next time.
who knows, crazy as life goes, that we'll write a story we tell to a very own. So let's live.
I'm on ring.
Did you get to sit down again?
Bien. Would you care to sit down, folks? Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the press conference for Foxcatcher. And I will introduce immediately the people who are here at this panel. Far left, my left, all I have to say is Spike Lee over the last 25 years and Julian Schnabel in between, producer John Killick. Bravo. Sitting next to him, in a minute, sitting next to him, just a few titles: American Hustle, Paul Thomas Anderson's Master, Kathy Bigelow, Zero Dark 30, producer Megan Ellenson. We've kept our eye on him since The Daily Show. He keeps surprising us, and certainly this morning he did when we saw the film. Mr. Steve Carell. Skip one, I'll get back to him later. Magic Mike, Side Effects, Haywire, quite a few other films, certainly 3 with Soderbergh. As one of the 2 brothers, Mark, Mr. Channing Tatum. Scorsese, Ang Lee, Spike Jonze, Michael Mann, David Fincher, the list is long. The elder brother, Mark Ruffalo. Sorry. He's Mark, he's Dave. And right in the center, director, Bennett Miller. Filmography short, perhaps, Capote and Moneyball, but already extremely important in the cultural landscape worldwide, I'm afraid to say so. Sir, I'm just quoting someone saying this morning.
Merci, Henri.
My pleasure. First question here, and the second question there. The lady here.
Hello, Marianne Barrio from AFP. First of all, congratulations on a really great film. My question is for Mr. Miller. Cannes has seen quite a few films whose families are really unhappy. We've had Grace of Monaco, the Grimaldis are unhappy. We've had Welcome to New York. And I was wondering if the DuPont family had been in touch with you guys. And secondly, my two question for Mr. Tatum and Mr. Ruffalo. I was just wondering how you prepared for the role. It's quite a physical one. Thanks.
Okay, one step at a time. Let's deal with Abel Ferrara first.
We had a little bit of contact with some members of the family before shooting, but no contact since.
Okay.
Yeah. So we prepared pretty intensely. I think we wrestled for about 6 months, 5 to 6 months before, and I think Mark and I both have cauliflower ear as take-home presents from it, and bad knees. So yeah, it was definitely something that kind of gets into your body and doesn't leave in a good way.
Mark?
Yeah, that's true. We wrestled a lot with some real world-class wrestlers, and we got to spend some time with the family and friends of the Schultzes, and really Bennett asked us to really immerse ourselves in that world, and so our life became wrestling, eating, sleeping, and sort of finding out about who these people were that we were playing.
Yeah, I got to actually spend time with Mark, the real Mark Schultz, so that was pretty special.
Well, that actually is going to be one of the questions. Your character dies, so obviously he could not be on the set. Thank you very much. Yours was on the set. Mm-hmm. How difficult is it to have the real character that you're portraying be on the set as often as he probably wants, and maybe coaching you? I don't know.
He definitely coached me early in the movie as far as wrestling-wise, and then when he was on set, it was such a polarizing thing. At times, I was so thankful and grateful that he was there, and at other times, I was completely just terrified. And now, I don't want to say distracted, but you know, I think when you're literally looking off camera and the person that you're playing is there, it can be.
He was only there for a couple of days, and Channing. I said, Channing, are you okay with this?
He's like, yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And I noticed him struggling a little bit, and Channing would never say, listen, man, I can't. I mean, I love him, but I just wouldn't say that. But I talked to Mark and Schultz and said, I think Channing just needs a little bit of space right now. and he gave it to us.
Yeah. He's such a sweet man.
Yeah, it was. Oh my, thank you. It was having Mark there was emotionally also very intense, because he was sort of reliving a difficult time for him, and so I think it was as hard on him too as it was on all of us, because you go through a bad time in your life once, and then you have to go through it again on a movie set. It's a little heavy.
Yeah.
In a way, then, Mr. Carell, you had the freest hand of all. I would assume you never met the real John.
No, I didn't.
So you were totally responsible for your creation, with the director, of course.
Well, I think there was a responsibility to the participants. So I felt like there was, free hand to a certain degree, but I watched as much as I could. I read as much as I could about him, and tried to gain a semblance as to the type of person he was. But yeah, he wasn't sitting off camera watching me portray him, so I didn't have that looming over my shoulder, no.
I just wanted to speak quickly to my preparation with the family and the friends. very early on, I met one of Dave's closest friends who was living on Foxcatcher with him for 6 years. And he really became my sort of guide and technical advisor. And we also became very friendly with Nancy Schultz and her children. And we were all sort of exploring the whole time, this 7 months of preparation with these people. And Bennett was inviting us to bring in stories and sort of reflections or epiphanies about these people as it related to the story as well. And so we were sort of on an investigative journalism sort of approach to telling the story. I felt that a lot of times as well.
And everyone was so giving and open, and everyone wanted to just express and explain their feelings pre and post after everything that happened, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for myself. So I thank you for letting me be a part of it, man. I can't imagine what it was like for Mark either, having, for Steve, having Nancy and the family around as he's playing this part too. So it was
Do you remember
intense.
the day when you met Nancy for the first time?
I did. I was, and I didn't meet her as myself. I met her in character, which was doubly awkward because, they tried to make me look as much like DuPont as I could, and it was incredibly emotional, obviously, and she's a remarkable woman, and as Channing said, very, very giving and very understanding of what we were trying to do and the dignity we were trying to afford her, and that she just had intrinsically. So it was sort of an overwhelming experience for me as well, to meet her and to talk with her. It was much better to talk with her later when I wasn't in character and get a chance to sit down and reflect with her.
Question over there, then over here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Harlan Jacobson from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm curious about the degree to which you filmed out in DuPont country, including Newtown Square, and how your location guys found you places to stand in for the DuPont estate. And also, I'd like to direct a question to Steve Carell, which is that you said you studied and read about John DuPont. Can you perhaps expand a little bit more on that, and as to how you interpreted the dominant sort of conflicts within John DuPont himself that you had to express in the role?
I had wanted to shoot in DuPont country, Newtown Square, on the main line outside Philadelphia, but circumstances pushed us a little bit west towards the Pittsburgh area, and we had some very, very excellent locations people, and Jess Gonshore, our production manager, who I've worked with on Capote and Moneyball and before that on other things, were just brilliant at recreating. But we did get lucky that another family, and I'm not permitted to say which, but DuPont, kind of a DuPont type family in terms of their history and wealth. What's that? Invited us onto their 17,000 acre estate and horse ranch, which had an amazing resemblance to Foxcatcher Farms, and they had never permitted any outsiders to even photograph it before. But I met with them. Amazingly, we got a meeting, and I sat around a table with characters that could have been in the movie, and told them what we were trying to do and asked for their support. And they'd all seen Moneyball several times, and they said, yeah, we'd love to have you do this. And it was the most inexpensive location on the movie, and one that money could not have bought.
Oh, and to speak to your question, there's a lot written about John DuPont and his family, and obviously the history of the DuPont legacy. So I did as much research as I could just based on that, based on his forefathers. But beyond that, there's actually quite a bit of video footage on him, some of which he shot for himself. He commissioned documentaries about himself and his life and his interests. So that was kind of a treasure trove to be able to watch those. And beyond that, you know, you get different interpretations of who he was or might have been, and you kind of have to just decide on one or a conglomeration of many. And it's, you know, it's difficult to say exactly what motivated him, bless you, and what, you know, what demons he had lurking inside of him. But I think, you know, with Bennett and with the rest of the cast, we were able to just sort of decide kind of internally what, you know, what this character's motivation was and what his demons might have been. I'm sorry if that's vague.
Question here, then here, then here. Go ahead.
Peter Hall from the Toronto Star in Canada. Congratulations to you all. I was really struck by the sound design of this movie and how you use silence so effectively. And also there's the effect of the cacophony, like in the helicopter scene. Obviously deliberate and really interesting, and I wanted to hear from Bennett Miller about that, and also maybe if the actors could describe how that affected your role, so how you presented that. Thanks.
Well, the sound. I think that the style of this film and my other films is not so much telling a story, but observing a story. And I try to create a context that will sensitize you to what's happening beneath the story, because there's a lot of American male repressed non-communication happening in this film, and there's a undercurrent, you know, beneath the undercurrent, and every scene is just a tip of the iceberg. And so the sound is one component that attempts to sensitize you, and you know, sometimes it pulls back as a means to, you know, pull you in, and hopefully it makes you look and listen and see what, you know, otherwise you might not have. But also it's, you know, it's an adventure, the film, really Mark's adventure. And it is a tour through these, you know, moods and temperatures and colors, and you know, I think sound, thank you for acknowledging our efforts. It's I think one of the most underappreciated and often unexploited art form within, you know, the many art forms that make up film. So thank you.
Bennett actually would give, I would ask him to give me a song that he would want me to listen to for the scene that, you know, obviously wasn't going to be played in the scene, but he would give me something, and most of the time it was not what I was thinking it was going to be. And I don't know if he was just doing that to throw me or what, but it was an interesting way to go about kind of finding different ways in to trying to get whatever I'm trying to get across. And he's just obsessive about behavior and like his environment. You know, if there's ducks that won't shut up in the background, he like loves it for some reason. Like he just, I don't know why, he loves the weird sounds.
They weren't ducks, they were geese.
Geese.
And it's very different than ducks. Duck honking is the sound of madness. What's so funny
That says it
about
all.
Question
It's
here,
the whole movie right
then
there.
here.
Hi, good morning. Chaz Ebert. Bennett, you have directed another movie, Capote, where the actor completely disappeared, just like with Steve Carell in this movie. And I wanted to know what that process is like, because both with your direction of Philip Seymour Hoffman and Capote, and in this movie, they seem to really be inhabiting the person, not just acting. And I wanted to know from Steve Carell, besides the physicality of it, what was the psychology of the acting? And I also have a question for John Killick, whom I watched over the years as a producer, and I think he makes very good choices, and so I'd like to hear from him as well.
Okay, shall we start with the producers? Otherwise, you won't hear the sound of the voices. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chaz. And I think one thing that Megan and I both share is supporting great artists, great work. And as much as this film is anchored in reality, you obviously can't overlook the style of Bennett and the signature of all these actors and what they bring to it. When Bennett first brought me the story and pitched it to me, I vaguely knew about it and hadn't researched it yet. But hearing it through his voice and knowing what the story would become in his hands was what brought me into it and what I'm so proud of. Thank you.
Megan?
I don't know. I think John said it pretty well.
Okay, about the actors now. Okay. Chaz, I guess the second part is gone.
Oh, Chaz, I'm avoiding your question because it makes me emotional, you know. And last time I saw you, I was more emotional than I wanted to ever be in front of people. Yeah. But to work with actors, you know, who are willing.
Okay.
I mean, but all of these guys, and of course Phil, but to work with actors who are willing to, you know, put faith in you. You have to be grateful for the rest of your life, you know. And you know, Steve obviously doesn't resemble anything he had done before, and I'll tell you, as I'm sure he will too, it was so far outside of his comfort zone. But we met, and we just talked about the character, and truthfully, I'd never seen Steve do anything that would give any material evidence that he could do this. But we just chatted, and I heard how he thought and was thinking about the character. And I mean, I had a vision for it working. I just thought he can do it, and he will commit himself to doing it, and it might hurt, but it will get there. And I really cannot imagine anybody doing any of these roles except for these guys. And
from my perspective, the first time we met, Bennett described various scenes in the film as to how he envisioned them, and it's the first time I've ever experienced this, that the final product was exactly what he had described to me. And tonally, it was exactly what he had described. And sometimes it was a very circuitous route to get there, but it was astonishing to me that and this was years ago, and all of those components came together, and all of the people that were cast were exactly, you know, what, you know, was reflected on the page. In terms of how I approached it, again, you know, you can do all sorts of research and listening to somebody's voice and watching them and trying to glean some sense of who they are. But I think ultimately you forget all about that when you start to shoot. And if you've rehearsed enough, it's inside of you as you're doing it. So it's not like, none of it felt like an acting exercise as we were going through it. None of it felt like we need to do something with this particular moment. It was a different experience altogether, and I credit Bennett with that.
And I credit the actors. So,
And we all credit the producers.
Yes, thank you, producers.
Something that Mark began to say before about meeting all of the people who had something to do with the story and their journalistic work and studying what happened and being invited to bring that into the process. It really was an exploration. There were no real dots to connect specifically. We did not know where the dots were. We knew the soul of the thing that was looking to be incarnated, but from day to day, we didn't know how that was going to happen. So the amount of research that these guys did and the ether of the place, which was the environment that was created with so many people who had vital roles in this story, who were down there with us, caring about the veracity of this story, and these guys, living it and breathing it, were invited to go off-road and quite a bit of the film. And I mean, I haven't done the math, but I'm going to say easily more than 50% was spontaneous, and another large chunk came the night before or the morning of. And I mean, quite a bit was just stuff that they had learned along the way and were able to speak for these characters.
Mark, Channing, you want to comment on?
No.
Question over there.
Hi, good morning. Baz Bamiroy from the Mail. Congratulations. It's a great movie and beautiful performances by all you guys. You're talking, Bennett, earlier about undercurrents, and one of the things I picked up was, the decline of America, the moral decline. I just wonder if you could talk about that. I mean, it hit me quite powerfully. I know it's a family drama, but it's also about a decline of something else.
Right. Thank you, Baz. When I started learning about the story, we see you, Roger. And you, Peggy.
Hi, Peggy.
When I first heard about this story and learned the details of it, it was so bizarre. I mean, I had never personally encountered anything that resembled any of this behavior, much less wrestling or, such a patrician family or the cultures within. And what happened was so, bizarre and absurdist and sometimes comical and ultimately horrible. But I had never experienced any of that, and yet it felt very familiar, and that within this story, there were themes that seemed much larger than the story. And because I really do care about these characters and this story, that's where the attention goes. But I can relate it to the world that we live in, our country. But I wouldn't, I do not want to venture out and make a comment about it. It's not a political film. The film itself does not take a moral position, so much as it's meant to be an investigation, in an attempt to understand and feel some of these dynamics and, towards this point of decline. I mean, it seems, yes, that's what's happening here, and that's what's happening on a larger scale too. And it's interesting to take a microscope and look at the interior of the genetics of this thing as it pertains to individuals. One way of looking at the, understanding the universe is through a microscope, and the other is through a telescope. And this is the microscopic attempt. But yeah.
Mark.
It did strike me at one point that there's a kind of a, there is, I feel like, a moral thrust to the story, or like there's a Greek tragedy buried in it, in that it was what happens when everything has a price tag on it, or what happens when everything is for sale. What happens to talent when it's for sale, or that it can be acquired by a price, and what happens to people when they're in a system that values almost everything at a price. And
modernity.
It's modernity. And so there's those moments that these people have, really, really, really talented people who can't really do what they do best in the world unless they can figure out a way how to monetize it. And but it costs them, and it costs their talent a great deal. And that was a theme that it's interesting today, and it's topical, and it's up for discussion. And the great thing about making movies and films is you could have that kind of discussion in a completely human and relatable way without it being political or polemic or divisive or blaming anybody. It's just like a reflection of how we are and where we are. And I really appreciate that we got to do that with this movie and this story, and that you had your eye on that ball, as well as just being completely honest about what happened with these really interesting people.
I think the first question, when I read the first article about the story, these guys were down there with this guy who didn't know anything about wrestling, but he was the head coach of a team of guys who were some of the best in the world, certainly the best in the country. And the first question, I thought, just, what's the transaction? Like, what is the transaction? And how honest are they with each other about it? But yeah, by not kind of concluding anything, and I think we all love to just jump to a conclusion and take a side in good and bad, but by really staring at it, and hopefully in an unflinching way, but to just keep looking at it. When you don't take a side, then you see past the thing that you're confronted with, and then you just keep looking at it and what's beyond it and what's beyond it. And yeah, so I don't know, maybe some people will take it as polemical in some way. It's not meant to be.
Could be. Thank you. Question there, then the gentleman from Belgium. Yeah.
Roger's, you did it.
Go ahead.
Karen Batt for the Huffington Post. This is a question for Mr. Bennett. Mr. Miller, I'm sorry. Your film is such a powerful and probing portrayal of vulnerability, and as you noted, in a masculine context in this case. And I was curious about your own interest and understanding of vulnerability in this film and in Capote as well, and the specific choices you make film-wise to make us feel it so strongly. For example, using sets or close-ups, because this was what was very strong for me in the film. And a similar question to Channing Tatum is, what choices did you make as an actor, physically or otherwise, to make us feel this vulnerability of your character, which very much rivets us? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I guess I feel like we are all so vulnerable anyway, and it's just a question of how aware are we of it, you know. And I don't think that these characters are really aware of their vulnerability or what would come. And one recurring comment from the many people we talked to was nobody could imagine that this was going to happen, that it would end this way, or that the outcome of these ambitions would be so destructive. But you know, who we are and who we think we are and what we're doing and what we think we're doing are not always the same. And having the benefit of knowing what happened in this story and the effect that it would have, it's impossible not to look at these characters as having these vulnerabilities, because what happened happened. And I, you know, like Mark, see it as tragic, which is to say, it's not random, that this is the trajectory of these characters' character. And I think the film attempts to see that, attempts to observe that. So I would say the same thing in Capote. It's, you know, the fault lies not within the stars kind of thing.
Well, I had the sort of unique ability to be able to actually talk to Mark Schultz and spend some intimate time with him, and you know, and that's always interesting because obviously we're telling a story, and you know, he has his entire life that we can't fit in 90 minutes or more, or a little more. You know, you obviously can take the physical things of ways someone walks or little small like eccentricities that he has and the way sort of that he thinks or whatnot. But I think one of the most, I guess one of the biggest lessons that I learned on this film specifically, we were even talking about it last night, is like I think I came in with like a plan of like this thing that I've prepared, and I was really ready to like just like, all right, first day, I'm on it. And after that first day, I felt like I ruined it. Like I was just like, I didn't feel like I did anything right. And what I realized after it is that this isn't like a bar that I was gonna like jump up and hit, or like I wasn't gonna score any day. You just keep digging and you just keep trying to find the truth in Mark and in the film, and what are we doing in each scene. A scene that is written perfectly, we'd get there and we'd do it, and we'd be like, oh, something's missing, and we'd spend, you know, hours trying to figure out what is, you know, how can we find it and find the truth in it. And I think the thing is just, you know, you got to give yourself over to it and sort of just let it come through, you know, in all the different stages of what making a movie is.